The dawn broke gray over Frosthaven, a pallid sun struggling to pierce the iron veil of clouds. Snow drifted lazily in the wind, yet there was no peace in the stillness. The city felt taut, stretched thin between triumph and dread. The traitor had been caught, but the wound he left behind bled suspicion into every hall, every council, every whispering corner. Rohan Iceborn stood at the city's northern wall, his breath a ghost in the freezing air. The black crystal hung beneath his armor, warm and insistent, as if eager to remind him of its presence. His eyes swept the horizon, white plains and jagged peaks, silent and unforgiving. Somewhere beyond those ridges, Kaelor stirred. Rohan could feel him like a pressure in his skull, a predator circling just beyond sight. Footsteps approached, crunching on the snow. It was Lord Brenner, commander of Frosthaven's cavalry. His face bore the strain of sleepless nights, yet his voice carried the weight of command. "My lord," Brenner said, bowing his head briefly. "The council convenes. They demand answers, about the spy, about the crystal, about you." Jaw tightened. "They question me already. They fear you as much as they honor you," Brenner admitted. "Malric's betrayal has poisoned trust. They wonder how Kaelor reached inside these walls at all." Rohan's hand brushed the pommel of his sword, fingers tracing the frost runes etched there. "Then let them ask their questions. I have nothing to hide." Inside the council chamber, the air was thick with heat from burning braziers, yet tension chilled the room more than any winter gale. Lords and captains sat in a semicircle, their cloaks heavy with fur, their eyes heavier with suspicion. At the head, Lady Isolde, matriarch of one of Frosthaven's oldest houses, leaned forward with a hawk's intensity. "You bring us victory, Lord Rohan," she began, her voice sharp but measured. "But you also bring shadows, this crystal you clutch, this name, Iceborn. Are we to believe it is merely a blessing? Or curse?" And murmurs rippled through the chamber, and Rohan stepped forward, his voice steady, though the crystal pulsed angrily beneath his armor. "The crystal saved Frosthaven. Without it, Kaelor's horde would have overrun our walls. I do not deny its power, nor its danger, but I will not let it consume me. I wield it for the city, and for no other." Lady Isolde's eyes narrowed. "So said every man who ever thought himself stronger than sorcery. Power corrupts, Lord Rohan. And already, frost creeps where you walk." Before Rohan could answer, Aelin rose. Her presence was like steel wrapped in fire, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Would you rather he had fallen? Would you prefer the dead clawing through your doors? Without him, none of you would be here to question his worth." NNTHE Council erupted, some nodding in agreement, others shouting in protest. The chamber became a storm of voices, fear and gratitude colliding. Then Rohan raised his hand, and silence fell, uneasy and brittle. "You fear the shadow that clings to me," he said, his words heavy with conviction. "Good. Fear keeps men sharp. But do not mistake vigilance for treachery. If I falter, you will know. Until then, we fight as one, or we do not fight at all." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lady Isolde leaned back, her gaze unreadable. "Very well, Iceborn, we will watch, but remember, wolves may defend the flock, or devour it." NNTHE words cut deep, but Rohan gave no sign. He bowed curtly and left the chamber, Aelin following in silence. Yet, as they stepped into the bitter wind outside, the black crystal flared hot against his skin, and in the whispering gusts he heard Kaelor's laughter. "They doubt you already, Wolf. Soon, their fear will do my work for me." Rohan clenched his jaw, his breath fogging in the cold. He had won the council's silence, but not their trust. And trust, he realized, was the most fragile weapon of all. The council's murmurs still rang in Rohan's ears as he strode through Frosthaven's icy streets. Snowflakes clung to his dark hair, melting into droplets that ran down his jawline, cold as the words that had been hurled at him. The people bowed as he passed, their eyes full of awe, yet behind their reverence flickered a hint of uncertainty. They whispered Iceborn, with a mixture of gratitude and unease, as though the name itself were a storm cloud hanging over their city. Nilene kept pace beside him, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword. She had spoken in his defense, but even she could not dispel the shadow that clung to him. Her silence now was heavier than words. Finally, she broke it. "You shouldn't carry it with you everywhere," she said, her eyes flicking toward his chest where the black crystal burned unseen. "I can't leave it," Rohan replied. His voice was low, yet hard with certainty. "It calls to me. If I set it aside, I fear Kaelor will seize it. Better it remains where I can control it." "Control?" she said sharply, halting in the street. "Or does it control you? I've seen how it changes you. The frost that creeps down your sword. The shadows that linger in your eyes. Rohan, this isn't just a weapon. It's a leash." Nhe turned toward her, snow crunching beneath his boots. "And what would you have me do? Throw it into the sea? Leave us defenseless? Without it, I would have died on the field. Without it, Frosthaven would have burned." Nher gaze softened, but her voice carried sorrow. "I would have you remain yourself, not this vessel it shapes you into." Before he could answer, a horn sounded from the northern wall. Urgent, sharp, 3 blasts. The call for scouts returning with grave tidings. Rohan and Aelin exchanged a glance, then hurried toward the gate. Atop the wall, the wind whipped their cloaks as a patrol stumbled through the gates below. 2 men half-carried a third, his body ragged with wounds, his face pale as snow. The soldier gasped for air, blood seeping through torn armor. "Speak," Rohan commanded, kneeling beside him, NNTHE scout's eyes, wide with terror, fixed on Rohan's face. They come. Kaelor's host marches again, larger than before, beasts of ice and flame, men bound in chains of frost. We tried to count them, but the storm..." He coughed violently, blood flecking his lips. "The storm is alive. It hunts." NTHE man shuddered, his breath faltering, before falling limp in Rohan's arms. Dead Naelin's face hardened. "Kaelor wastes no time. He knows Frosthaven bleeds distrust. He'll strike before we can mend it." Rohan rose, his gaze fixed on the horizon, though the storm lay far beyond sight. "Then we mend it on the field. Doubt or not, they will follow me. They must." An NBUT, as he spoke, the crystal pulsed hot against his skin, as though mocking his resolve. A whisper slid through his mind, cold and cruel. "Lead them, Iceborn. Lead them to ruin." NHI's breath hitched. He clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. Yet he forced the whisper aside and barked to Brennar, who had joined them on the wall. "Ready the cavalry. Signal every bannerlord. If Kaelor thinks Frosthaven will cower, he will choke on his folly." Brennar nodded and hurried off. But Aelin caught Rohan's arm, her voice urgent. "Listen to me. If you go out there with that thing burning in your chest, you may not be leading them. You may be delivering them. You may be delivering them." Then Rohan's eyes locked with hers, storm meeting fire. "Then pray your faith holds, Aelin, because I have no choice but to bear it." Below them, horns rang out across the city as soldiers scrambled to arms, banners snapping in the bitter wind. Above, the gray sky darkened, heavy with snow and something far more sinister. And in that thickening gloom, Rohan thought he saw movement on the far horizon, shadows shifting within the storm. Watching, waiting, NNTHE enemy was already closer than he feared. The storm had a voice that night. Nas Rohan stood upon Frosthaven's walls, the wind keened like 1,000 shrieking ghosts, rattling banners and howling through arrow slits. Torches guttered, their flames struggling against the gale. Beneath him, soldiers rushed to and fro, strapping on armor, sharpening blades, their faces grim with a fear they dared not speak aloud. "Too soon," Brennar muttered, his scarred hands gripping the stone parapet. "The men aren't ready. The wounds from the last battle haven't healed, and now Kaelor comes with a host twice the size. They will fight," Rohan said flatly. His eyes swept the darkness beyond the gates, where the storm writhed like a living beast. Ready or not, they have no other choice. Naelin, who stood close by, spoke low but sharp. "If you demand too much, they will break. Fear is a plague, Rohan. It spreads faster than fire. They need hope, not only orders." "Hope," Brennar scoffed. "A fine word, but it doesn't cut down enemies. Men follow strength. And right now, they look to him." He nodded at Rohan and The weight of their gazes pressed heavily. Rohan felt the crystal burn beneath his armor, as if it relished their words. A whisper slithered in his mind, soft as silk. "Nin, give them what they crave. Power. Show them the storm bows to you, and their faith will never falter again." Nhe closed his eyes for a heartbeat, forcing the voice down, burying it beneath sheer will. Then he turned and raised his hand. "Bring me a torch." Angard rushed forward and placed it in his grip. Rohan held it high, stepping to the edge of the wall where the soldiers below could see him. His voice thundered across the courtyard. "Men of Frosthaven, you've heard the horns, you know what waits beyond the snow. Kaelor sends his legions, thinking us broken, thinking us weak. But look around you." He pointed to the men massed in the yard, their armor gleaming faintly in torchlight, their breaths steaming in the cold. "Do you see weakness here? No, you see the last shield of the north. You see the line that will not yield." NTHE soldiers roared, fists pounding against shields. The sound rolled through the night like thunder. Yet in the roar, Rohan heard something else, his own heartbeat, pulsing in time with the crystal's glow. NNHE lifted the torch higher. "Tomorrow the storm will crash upon these walls. But we are the stone, unbroken. Let Kaelor send his monsters. Let him send his chains of frost. We will shatter them as ice shatters beneath the hammer." NTHE roar grew louder, filling the night. For a moment, the fear receded, replaced by raw fervor. Rohan lowered the torch, meeting the eyes of his captains. "Prepare them. Every sword, every bow. We march at dawn." NTHE soldiers surged to their tasks, galvanized. Yet as the yard emptied, Aelin stepped closer, her voice barely above the wind. "You spoke of unyielding stone. But stone can crack, Rohan. And once it does, it cannot be mended." NNHE did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the storm. Within its depths, he saw flickers of blue fire, shapes that moved with unnatural grace. Shadows of Kaelor's army. Then, faint but distinct, a sound carried on the wind, a low, guttural horn, not of men but of beasts. It vibrated through the earth, a growl from the frozen abyss. NNTHE storm was no longer waiting. It was coming. Nen Rohan's grip tightened on the torch until his knuckles whitened. And as the sound of that monstrous horn faded, another whisper stirred inside his skull. "Nen, at dawn, the world will kneel to you, or bury you beneath the snow." The night stretched long, a silence between heartbeats, broken only by the restless storm. In the barracks, the soldiers prepared in grim silence. Leather straps tightened over steel, blades whetted to a razor's edge. Some whispered prayers to forgotten gods, while others sharpened their knives in silence, the scrape of steel on stone sounding like the ticking of fate. Rohan moved among them, his cloak trailing frost across the stone floor. The men rose as he passed, their eyes wide, their respect mingled with something colder. Fear. "They look at you as though you are more than flesh," Aelin murmured beside him. She wore a half-plate of silvered mail, her hair tied back for war. But fear of a man is a brittle foundation. When it cracks, it shatters. "They need fear as much as hope," Rohan answered. His voice was rough, his thoughts darker. Fear binds men to each other. It drives them to fight, to cling to life with claws and teeth. NNSHE frowned, but said no more. Brenner appeared from the shadows, helm tucked under his arm. "Scouts have returned. Kaelor's army marches through the storm, thousands, maybe more. And beasts among them, things I've never seen." Rohan felt the crystal pulse against his ribs. It responded not to his fear, but to the challenge. He turned to Brenner. "Then the walls will be tested. Get the archers on the ramparts. Line the oil cauldrons. I want every gate reinforced." Brenner bowed and left, barking orders as he went. Yet when the captains departed, Rohan remained still. The weight of command pressed down on him like iron chains. He remembered the faces of men he had led before, those who now lay buried beneath the snow. Victory had claimed them, just as surely as defeat. NNHE closed his eyes, and the storm whispered to him. This time, it was no illusion. It was Kaelor and Frostborn, came the voice, smooth and terrible. "How noble to stand in your fortress and rally the doomed, but stone crumbles, fire dies. And when the storm breaks, all will kneel." Rohan's hand clenched around the hilt of his sword. His breath came in white clouds. "If you mean to break me, Kaelor, you'll need more than words." A chuckle slithered through his mind like oil over water. "I need only time. The crystal you cherish is mine already. Every beat of your heart binds you tighter to me. Soon, when you raise your sword, It will not be against me, but against those you swore to protect. Rohan staggered, pressing a hand to his chest. The crystal burned like fire, and ice fused. For a moment, he saw blood. Soldiers falling beneath his own blade, their screams echoing in his ears. His grip trembled, and Rohan? Aelin's voice cut through, sharp with alarm. She caught his arm. What is it? And NHE shook his head, forcing the vision away. Nothing. The storm plays tricks. NNBUT, she did not believe him. Her eyes lingered on him, dark with suspicion and sorrow. NNTHE horns sounded then, deep, echoing, carried on the storm winds. Every man in Frosthaven froze. Silence gripped the barracks, broken only by the trembling of shields in nervous hands. The enemy is here, Brenner shouted from the courtyard. To arms! To the walls! Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for weapons, rushing out into the storm's maw. The gates thundered shut, the portcullis dropped, and the horns of Frosthaven answered in defiance. Rohan drew his sword, its steel rimed with frost. He looked once more at Aelin and stay close, he told her. Whatever comes through that storm, we face it together. And then, the first shadow appeared at the edge of the snow, towering, inhuman, with eyes like burning ice, and NTHE battle for Frosthaven had begun. The first shapes emerged from the storm like nightmares given flesh. They were not men, not entirely. Twisted figures clad in blackened armor, their limbs too long, their eyes burning with an unnatural light. Among them prowled beasts with hides of frozen stone, their maws wide enough to swallow a man whole. A chorus of horns wailed across the snow. Then silence fell, only the storm howling above. Archers! Brenner's voice cut through the din. Loose! A hail of arrows arced into the white void, vanishing into the storm. A moment later, the shrieks began. Some struck true, others bouncing harmlessly from armor. Still, the enemy did not falter. Rohan stood atop the battlements, sword in hand, watching the tide advance. He felt the crystal throb against his chest, resonating with the oncoming horde. They carried Kaelor's will in their very bones. Hold, he whispered, though the words were more to himself than to his men. Hold until the walls bleed. Beside him, Aelin raised her bow. Her first arrow found its mark, piercing the throat of a beast that toppled into the snow with a crash. She knocked another, her eyes cold, her hands steady. NNTHE first wave slammed against the gates. Frosthaven shook with the impact. Wooden beams groaned. The portcullis shuddered in its stone grooves. Oil! Brenner roared. Cauldrons tipped. Scalding pitch poured over the enemy, igniting in a roar of fire. The storm's snow hissed as flame devoured beast and soldier alike. Screams rose, then were swallowed by the blizzard. NNBUT, for each enemy that fell, 2 more seemed to emerge. The storm was endless, and so was Kaelor's army. Rohan clenched his jaw. If the gates fall, it ends here. They won't, Aelin replied, loosing another arrow. Yet even she sounded as though she were trying to convince herself. Then came the sound, the splitting crack of stone. NNTHE walls trembled. A beast, larger than the rest, slammed its body against the fortifications, again and again, each strike rattling Frosthaven to its foundations. Its hide shimmered like ice-forged iron, immune to fire and steel alike. Rohan gripped the battlement. The vision Kaelor had shown him returned unbidden, men falling to his own sword, his hands drenched in their blood. He shook it off, forcing his mind into the present. "And open the gate," he ordered, and Brenner turned to him in disbelief. "Open it? That thing will tear through us like wheat. Then I'll meet it before it does," Rohan said. His eyes burned with frost. NNTHE captains hesitated, torn between obedience and fear. Nolan stepped forward, bow lowering. If he faces it alone, he dies. I go with him. Nolan shot her a sharp look, but she didn't waver. At last, he gave a single nod. Knowing with a groan of chains, the gates creaked open. Snow blasted inward, along with the stench of death. The beast roared, charging forward, eyes locking on the lone figure stepping into the storm. Rohan's sword gleamed pale in the darkness, frost coiling around the blade. NNTHE soldiers on the walls held their breath. Brenner muttered a curse, gripping his spear, Then man and monster collided. Steel met stone hide, sparks flying. The beast's claws raked the earth, gouging trenches into the snow. Rohan ducked beneath its swing, driving his blade into its leg. Frost exploded outward, spiderwebbing across its hide. The creature howled, staggering. For a moment, hope flickered across the faces on the wall. Then the crystal inside Rohan flared. His hand trembled, his vision blurred. For the briefest second, the beast before him wavered, and in its place, he saw Aelin, wide-eyed, his sword already at her heart. Froze. Beast roared, seizing its chance. It struck, and Rohan was thrown back into the snow. The snow swallowed him whole. For an instant, all Rohan knew was cold, his body sinking into drifts as the weight of the beast's strike crushed the air from his chest. Above, the creature loomed like a mountain of living ice, its maw opening wide, rows of frozen fangs glinting in the stormlight. The soldiers on the wall shouted in despair, before the beast could finish the blow. A shaft of fire streaked through the gale. Aelin's arrow struck its eye, sinking deep. The monster shrieked, staggering, clawing at its own face. Up. Aelin's voice cut through the chaos. Rohan, move! Forced himself onto his knees, lungs burning, the crystal in his chest throbbing with erratic pulses. His sword lay half buried in the snow. He reached for it, fingers shaking, and as he touched the hilt, frost leapt across the blade, flaring brighter than before. Beast lunged again, half blind now, its wounded eye dripping frozen ichor. Rohan rolled aside, the earth shattering where its claws struck. Snow burst upward like waves crashing. Storm itself seemed to answer Kaelor's will, winds driving knives of ice into the flesh of every man on the wall. Brenner bellowed orders above the din. Keep firing! Don't let the line break! Men obeyed, loosing volley after volley, though most shafts shattered harmlessly against armor. Yet their cries gave the fight rhythm, a desperate song of survival against impossible odds. Rohan steadied himself, teeth clenched. He could feel Kaelor watching, somewhere in the unseen dark beyond the storm. Every pulse of the crystal was a reminder. This was not merely battle, but trial. Sprinted forward. Beast reared back to crush him, but Rohan slid low, his blade flashing upward. Steel met the soft joint beneath its arm, carving through sinew and bone. Frost surged from the wound, racing up the monster's chest like living fire. It howled, collapsing onto one knee. Rohan seized the moment, climbing its body, each step freezing solid beneath him as though the frost itself carried him higher. He drove his blade deep into the creature's throat, twisting hard. A heartbeat. The world was silent. The beast collapsed, earth shaking, its body shattering into shards of ice. Storm roared louder, almost in fury. Walls of Frosthaven erupted in cheers, men pounding their weapons against stone and wood. Yet the joy was fleeting, for even as the great beast fell, new shadows emerged from the blizzard, taller, stronger, clad in frost-forged steel. And behind them, a figure cloaked in midnight frost, its presence alone, dimming the fires along the wall. Nalin's breath caught. One of Kaelor's champions, figure raised its weapon, a glaive of black ice, and pointed toward the gate. The horde surged, and Brenner cursed. They'll break us yet. Rohan pulled his sword free, stumbling back toward the gates. His body trembled, but his eyes burned bright, frost crawling along his skin like living veins. Nailing caught his arm. You can't fight them all. The crystal! It's tearing you apart. Looked at her, his jaw tight. Then I'll let it. Better to burn in battle than let Kaelor take this city. Gate shuddered as the enemy struck, again and again. Wood splintered. Stone cracked. The defenders scrambled to brace it, but the weight of the storm was unstoppable. Brenner's voice rang out. Fall back to the inner wall. We hold what we can. Even as men ran, the gate gave way with a deafening crack. Splinters flew. Snow poured in. Enemy was inside Frosthaven. And at their head, the champion advanced, glaive dripping frostfire, its gaze fixed only on Rohan. The champion strode through the wreckage of Frosthaven's gates as though the splintered wood were nothing but reeds beneath his boots. He stood a head taller than any man, armored in plates of black ice that steamed in the cold, as if even winter itself recoiled from him. NNHI's glaive dragged sparks across stone as he advanced, the sound shrieking through the storm like a scream. None Rohan stepped forward to meet him. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet he knew there was no fleeing this fight. The men looked to him, their courage hung on his defiance. "Hen, hold the walls!" Brenar shouted, rallying his soldiers. "Do not let the horde through!" NNTHE defenders clashed with Kaelor's lesser spawn in a maelstrom of steel and frost, but all eyes still flicked toward the duel about to ignite in the courtyard. NNTHE champion halted a dozen paces away. His helm, a jagged mask of frozen bone, shifted as he spoke, his voice carrying like cracking glaciers. "You are the Iceborn." Rohan tightened his grip on the sword. Frost spiraled up the blade in answer. "And you are nothing but Kaelor's leash hound." NTHE champion tilted his head, unfazed. "I am his will-made flesh. And you," he raised the glaive, its edge shimmering with a black flame. "You are a mistake that must be broken." NNHE lunged. NNTHE glaive struck with a force that split stone. Rohan barely deflected the blow, sparks and shards of ice exploding around them. The impact hurled him backward, boots skidding, pain knifed through his chest, the crystal pulsing wildly as though it sought to answer the blow itself. For a terrifying heartbeat, he nearly lost his grip on the blade. NNBUT voice cut through the haze. "Rohan, focus!" NNHE steadied himself, raised the sword, and advanced again. And steel clashed with ice in a storm of strikes. The champion's glaive swept arcs too fast for its size, each swing threatening to cleave Rohan in half. Rohan countered with desperate precision, his blade leaving trails of frost in the air, sparks spraying as steel screamed against ice. Around them, soldiers fought and died, their cries drowned beneath the thunder of battle. Yet a circle opened, men and monsters alike unwilling or unable to intrude on the duel. NNTHE champion pressed forward, each blow driving Rohan closer to the shattered gate. "You bleed already," the voice within the helm growled. Kaelor was right. The crystal eats you from within. Rohan spat blood onto the snow, but his eyes burned with defiance. "If it kills me, I'll drag you to the grave with me." NNHE feinted left, then spun right, his blade slashing across the champion's thigh. Ice shattered, but no blood came, only more frost. The champion staggered, then answered with a crushing backhand that sent Rohan's sprawling NNTHE world tilted. The snow beneath him steamed as his blood fell. The crystal flared so bright in his chest he thought it might burst. In through blurred vision, he saw the champion advancing, glaive raised for the killing blow. Soldiers cried out, but none could reach him in time. Then Aelin loosed an arrow. It struck the champion's helm, glancing off but cracking the mask. A jagged line split across the bone. NNTHE champion paused, touched the fracture, and for the first time, let out something like a growl of pain. Rohan seized the moment. With a roar, he surged upward, blade flashing. Frostfire erupted along its edge as he drove it toward the champion's chest. NNBUT, before steel met target, the champion caught the blade in his gauntlet. Frost surged up Rohan's arm, biting deep into flesh. They locked eyes, icy void against burning frost. NNTHE champion leaned close. The glaive descended in a blur of black frost, and the world seemed to slow. Rohan felt the weight of every heartbeat, every breath, as though time itself held its breath. The crystal in his chest flared with searing pain, urging him, no, commanding him, to let go, to unleash what simmered within. NNHE wrenched his sword free of the champion's grip, barely twisting aside as the glaive slammed into the cobbles where he had stood. Stone split, a jagged crater opening beneath them. "Rohan!" Aelin's cry rang through the chaos, sharp with terror. NNTHE Iceborn staggered back, clutching at his chest. He could feel the frost creeping along his veins, the same cold he had seen devour enemies now clawing at his own flesh. The crystal pulsed, begging release. And then he made a choice. NNHE let it flow. N-power burst from him like a frozen tide, a shock wave of white-blue frost exploding outward. The air itself cracked, snow swirling into a furious maelstrom. Men and monsters alike were flung back, screams muffled by the roar of unleashed magic. NNTHE champion was driven to one knee, ice crawling across his armor. His glaive shuddered, its dark flame flickering. Rohan's eyes burned with an unnatural light, his breath steaming in thick plumes. He felt no longer entirely himself. Half man, half storm, his very soul caught between mortal blood and the will of the heart. NHE advanced, each step leaving deep rifts of ice in the stone. NNTHE champion rose to meet him, wrenching free of the ice with brute strength. "So the crystal consumes you after all," he snarled. "Good, it saves me the trouble." They collided once more, frost and shadow crashing like warring storms. Sparks, ice shards, and black fire lit the courtyard in a frenzy of light. Rohan's blade, now a torch of frost fire, struck with unnatural fury. Every blow powered by the raw surge of the heart. NNTHE champion reeled, armor cracking beneath the onslaught. Elin loosed arrow after arrow, striking joints and seams in the black ice, slowing his defense. Soldiers rallied, hacking back the lesser spawn, giving their Iceborn room to fight. NNFOR the first time, hope sparked. NNBUT hope died quickly. NNTHE champion roared and slammed his glaive into the earth. From the fissure erupted chains of black frost, writhing serpents that coiled around Rohan's arms and legs. They burned cold, searing through his skin, rooting him in place. NNTHE heart screamed within him, pulsing against his ribs, but he could not break free. NNTHE champion approached, helm cracked, voice like grinding stone. "Kaelor does not fear your storm. He forged the storm. You are nothing but his echo." NNHE raised the glaive, aiming for Rohan's heart. NN time seemed to shatter. Rohan saw Aelin screaming, loosing one final arrow. He saw Brenner carving through foes to reach him, too far away. He saw his men faltering, their courage breaking at the sight of their champion bound, and deep within he heard another voice, low, ancient, carried on the pulse of the crystal. "Let me in fully," it whispered. "You cannot kill him alone. Together we will break him. But once you open the gate, it cannot be shut." NTHE choice seared through him, hotter than the frost burning his veins. If he surrendered fully to the heart, he might kill the champion. He might even save Frosthaven. NNBUT, he would no longer be Rohan. NNTHE glaive began its descent. The world narrowed to the gleam of the descending glaive. Death itself rode its edge, and Rohan knew he had a single heartbeat to decide. NHE opened the gate. NNTHE black crystal surged, and with it came a flood of voices. Not one, but countless, like a chorus of drowned souls. They howled, sang, begged, and exulted. His body convulsed as if torn apart, every vein filled with molten ice. His vision fractured, showing not one battlefield but a dozen, past wars, fallen kingdoms, rivers of frost and fire. And then he was no longer bound, and NTHE chains of black ice shattered with a scream like breaking glass. Frost exploded outward, ripping fissures through the courtyard, tossing soldiers and spawn alike to the ground. The glaive struck, but Rohan caught it barehanded, stopping the killing blow. His fingers bled, flesh burning against the cursed steel, but he did not let go. NNTHE champion's helm split wide, eyes widening in sudden fear. "What are you?" Rohan's voice was no longer wholly his. It echoed, doubled, layered with something older. "I am the storm you forged, and the ruin you left behind." With a wrench, he tore the glaive from the champion's grip and drove his blade into the crack of the enemy's armor. Frostfire surged through the wound, flooding the champion's body with freezing light. The warlord screamed, his form shattering, collapsing into shards of blackened ice that scattered across the stones. And NFOR a moment, there was silence. Then the heart roared within him, unchecked. Rohan staggered, clutching his chest. Frost swept outward from his body in great spirals, freezing walls, towers, and even the banners of Frosthaven. Soldiers scrambled back in terror as the storm spread. "Rohan." Aelin's voice pierced the haze. She rushed forward, bow cast aside, her hands gripping his arms. "You must stop. Pull it back." NBUT he could not. The flood was endless, a river with no banks. His skin cracked with glowing veins, his eyes blinding white blue. He felt as if he were dissolving, becoming the storm itself. "Yes," the crystal whispered, its tone soft, coaxing. "This is the truth of you. You were never flesh. You were always the storm. Stay with me, and we will make the world kneel." NNHE saw visions, kingdoms bowing, oceans frozen, empires shattered in his name. And for a heartbeat, he wanted it. Then Aelin struck him. NNHER hand, calloused and warm, cracked against his cheek. He blinked, staggered, her face swimming into view through the blizzard of light. "You are not this thing," she hissed, eyes burning with fury and fear. "You are Rohan. My Rohan. If you let go of that, then Kaelor has already won." NNHER words tore through the maelstrom like an arrow through fog. For a moment, just a moment, he found himself again. Rohan seized that moment. With a cry that was half agony, half defiance, he wrenched back against the crystal's will, forcing the storm inward. The frost shrieked, collapsing back into his chest. He fell to his knees, gasping, blood spilling from his mouth. NNTHE storm was gone. The heart was silent, and around him, the courtyard lay in ruin, walls cracked, ground frozen, bodies strewn like broken dolls. His soldiers stared, their faces pale with awe and terror. NNTHE champion was dead. The spawn were fleeing, their master's fall unraveling their will. Frosthaven had been saved. NNBUT. When Rohan lifted his head, he saw not triumph in their eyes, only fear. And then a horn sounded from the far side of the city, and a second host was marching. Larger, stronger, led by something worse. Nin Rohan staggered to his feet, blade in hand, as the gate shuddered. The horn blast rolled over Frosthaven like a doom bell. Its tone was not the crude call of raiders, but something deeper, older, like the groan of the earth itself. Even the wind seemed to falter, listening. Rohan forced himself upright, legs trembling. Every muscle screamed from the battle, but his hand found the hilt of his sword. He looked to the gate, and his heart sank. Through the drifting fog of ice, shadows emerged, rank upon rank, far more disciplined than the swarm they had just broken. Dark banners unfurled, painted with a twisting sigil that writhed as if alive. Their spears gleamed like shards of night, and between their shields marched creatures half man, half specter, their faces veiled in shadow. At their head strode a figure taller than any man. His armor was wrought of black glass, and within it glimmered a faint, pulsing frostlight, as though his body were hollow and filled with ice. His helm was crowned with jagged horns, and across his chest hung a chain of skulls encased in crystal. He carried no weapon, yet the air bent around him, as if the world itself recoiled. NNTHE soldiers of Frosthaven faltered. Some dropped their spears, others began to pray. The city had survived one storm only to face a greater one. Naelin moved to Rohan's side, her bow trembling in her hands. "Is this another of Kaelor's champions?" Rohan's mouth was dry. "No, this is worse. This is one of the Hollow Kings." NNTHE name struck like thunder. Old stories told of them, wraith lords bound in ancient wars, entombed beneath the ice, until Kaelor's rise had broken their chains. Even in legend, they were unstoppable. NNTHE black-armored giant raised a hand. The host halted as one, thousands of boots stamping into silence. Then he lowered his hand, and the earth split, and a chasm tore open before the walls of Frosthaven, belching mist and frostfire. From its depths crawled things that had no names. Serpents of ice with too many eyes, wolves with ribs open to the cold air, corpses walking with frozen crowns on their brows. The smell of death and snow choked the defenders. Fear spread like wildfire. Men looked to Rohan. Some whispered, "Iceborn," as if the word were both prayer and curse. Others backed away, unwilling to stand near him after what they had seen. Rohan's chest ached where the crystal pulsed. The heart was awake again, whispering, "Take me, open me. Only I can stand against him." NNBUT. He remembered Aelin's voice, her hand, her fury. He remembered the terror in his soldiers' eyes. If he unleashed the storm again, Frosthaven would not survive him. NNTHE Hollow King stepped forward. His voice rolled like an avalanche, low and terrible, carrying across the walls. "Child of the heart," he intoned, and though his helm hid his face, Rohan felt the weight of that unseen gaze. You are ours. Do not resist. When the ice takes you, you will kneel, as all have kneeled before. NNTHE words sank into his bones, colder than any wind. His knees buckled, frost creeping up from the stones toward his boots. He forced himself to stay standing, blade raised, though it shook in his grasp. In around him, silence. Behind him, the walls of Frosthaven, cracked and bleeding. Before him, the endless host, a king of shadows commanding their march, NHE, had won the battle, only to face the war. Rohan drew breath, the frost in his chest burning. Then let the ice come, he growled, voice ragged but unbroken. I will not kneel. NTHE, Hollow King lifted his hand. The army advanced, and the gates of Frosthaven groaned beneath the weight of oncoming doom.